Hazard, spelled HAZARD, is a show about how to prepare, prevent, and prevail over disaster. And it's hosted by me, a comedian. So get ready to be flooded with puns. I'm gonna hit you with a tsunami of jokes. There'll be no sandbagging. We're gonna turn the tide on this topic. Too much? All right, I'm not trying to cause any waves. Sorry, let's get started. Edges of America, a battle of life and death endures. A fight for land and resources on the front line that separates the terrestrial and the aquatic. A strategic location that promotes and protects life, but is losing land to stronger forces. The wetlands need our help, not only for its sake, but for our own. Wetlands are sensitive parts of floodplains where the soil is saturated for part or all of the year. Within the floodplain, wetlands mark an area of transition between the land and the water. They are common throughout the world, yet regionally unique, as evidenced by their many designations. Marshes, estuaries, mudflats, fens, swamps, deltas, Carolina bays, bogs, and even floodplains. Did I say bog? I love me some chicken bog. But floodplains and wetlands are not the same thing. Wetlands often exist within floodplains and are part of the floodplain that is usually wet, but not always underwater. Building and reshaping of wetlands is more strictly regulated than building in other parts of the floodplain, but federal control is difficult given the variety of wetland environments. According to a report on the status of coastal wetlands, more than 80,000 acres of coastal wetlands were lost, on average, each year between 2004 and 2009. Could someone please explain to me how 80,000 acres a year just goes missing? Coastal wetlands, in particular, are pressed from both sides. The sea is incrementally rising, eating up the edges of land, while human development stakes a claim from the mainland side. Up until the middle of the 20th century, wetlands were thought of as wastelands, full of pests and disease. People filled in and reshaped them to support agriculture and development. In regard to agriculture, drainage of wetlands was actually considered a conservation process. According to a U.S. Geological Survey that was published in 1996, by the mid-1970s, the U.S. had lost nearly half of the wetlands that were present prior to colonization. New legislation, allied with wetland preservation, pointed to different technical benefits of these lands. Rather than land that could be shaped into something else, wetlands served their own purpose and protected not only the plants and animals that live there, but the surrounding area as well. Yet, despite all of this, the rate of wetland loss in coastal watersheds is again on the rise. Wetlands can be our first line of defense against the hazards of sea level rise, storm surge, and river flooding, as we will explain, but only if they can exist on their terms. Disrupting the wetland ecosystem drains the power of its protection. Every year we're losing ground. The time is now to shore up our defenses in these critical areas. While wetlands can be found all over the world, the look and even smell of wetlands are distinctly different from each other, even within one geographic area. Yeah, they smell different, I'll put the smell of low-country pluff mud up against the upstate wetland smell any day. Wetlands cover hundreds of millions of acres of land area in the United States, usually found alongside waterways and in floodplains. They can vary widely in soil, topography, climate, water chemistry, and vegetation. Many states have 20% or more of their total area classified as wetlands, with coastal states usually having a higher percentage. Approximately 48 million acres can be found in the wet and humid southeast region. The 3 states that have the highest percentage of wetlands as land area are Florida, Louisiana, and South Carolina. Almost half of the state of Alaska is considered wetlands. Seems like those should be called icelands. The western region of the country covers the largest region in the U.S., but has the least amount of wetland acres due to its arid climate. Wetlands can be classified in many ways, usually based on hydrology or the movement of water relative to the land. Vegetation and soil type can also distinguish between kinds of wetlands. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, identifies 5 types based on how the land and water relate. Wasn't there another NOAA that did some early flood research? Wetlands can be classified as marine, riverine, lacustrine, estuarine, and palustrine. Marine and riverine wetlands are the most common types of wetlands. Marine wetlands are tidal wetlands exposed to the ocean. These wetlands have harsh environments and large flat beaches. The riverine wetland is associated with moving water and is that area of shallow water between the banks of deep rivers. Entire stream or river channels can be considered wetland if the channel bottom is near the surface of the water. Riverine floodplains are subject to periodic flooding due to excessive rainfall. Lacustrine wetlands are associated with tidal and non-tidal lakes and large reservoirs that can be characterized by vegetation that is submerged or floating. Estuarine wetlands are more mainland than marine wetlands, carry less salinity, and are not exposed to open ocean. Palustrine wetlands refer to a system of inland non-tidal wetlands characterized by the presence of trees, shrubs, and emergent vegetation. While hydrology is one way wetlands are identified, scientists also classify based on plant life and soil type. Each have unique and abundant vegetation perfectly suited for the nutrient-rich earth and moist environment. The landscape, soil, and water characteristics create a unique habitat for wildlife to live, nest, and hunt. Wetlands have been likened to coral reefs and rainforests as one of the most productive ecosystems in the world. Hundreds of species live, breed, or feed in these biomes, ranging from microorganisms to mammals. According to the EPA, although wetlands make up only 5% of the land area of the lower 48 states, more than 1/3 of threatened and endangered species live there. Sometimes identifying what is a wetland can be as obvious as the word suggests, but not always. In fact, some wetlands are not even wet in certain seasons. That's why so much goes into characterizing these areas. While wetland loss has declined substantially over the last couple of decades, recent surveys indicate that trend is reversing, and a decline in loss is still a loss. This is Hazard.
Hey everybody, hey, thank you so much. Let's get started. I used to wake up with this big old fluffy head of curly brown hair. Now I wake up with CPAP mask strap marks across my face. I don't mind being bald. I find it comes in handy. One obvious way it comes in handy is explaining wetland management. For example, if my hairline is the marsh or the wetlands, and my hair is the river, and my bald spot is a big old paved parking lot, then hair products would be preventive measures. And a nice toupee, the restoration process. See what I did there?
So exactly why are we spending all this time talking about some soggy land on a show about hazards? The easy answer is, what is good for the earth tends to be good for humans. But why? Wetlands improve water quality by catching upland runoff and filtering waste, nutrients, and sediment. Sediment settles while plants and microorganisms absorb and use the runoff water and nutrients. The soils can actually break down contaminants and purify the water. The striking array of wildlife sustained by the habitat also supports the multi-billion-dollar fishing and hunting industries. The lush wetland environment is essential for the life cycle of 75% of the fish and shellfish in the U.S. 90% of the fish we catch for food and recreation live in wetlands. Also, wetland plants prevent erosion by holding soil in place even under heavy wind and high tides. When fortified by numbers, the root systems of native plants can hold soil together and prevent the land from washing away. These beautiful areas create space for other outdoor recreational activities, including biking, paddling, jogging, and more, and often embody the identity of a community. It is important to note that, like development, heavy recreation can disrupt the natural functions the wetland would normally provide. Water quality, the protection of wild plants and animals, erosion prevention, and the instillment of community pride could be reason enough to hold wetlands as a high priority. But our biggest threat, if we were to lose our neighboring wetlands, would be the ensuing flooding of inland homes and businesses. This is because one of the most important functions of the wetlands is to store excess water after heavy rain and snow. Wetland vegetation obstructs the movement of floodwaters, slowing the distribution over floodplains. Precipitation and runoff can then slowly release to the main water body as stormwater recedes, or it can infiltrate the ground to recharge groundwater. Palustrine and estuarine wetlands make up nearly 70% of mainland American wetlands. These coastal wetlands can store billions of gallons of water during hurricanes and other major weather events. You see, wetlands are just one part of the intricate balance of the relationships that shape the earth. What's taken will need to be replaced elsewhere, but sometimes what's lost is lost forever.
A barrier island is a segment of land that separates the ocean from the mainland. There's an offshore region. We start off very deep, and as we approach the barrier, we get shallow, it ramps up. Then we have an active beach, we hope anyway. That's in a natural system, there's always an active beach. Then we have a berm, then maybe a sand dune if we have that in those areas. Sometimes it's just a flat plain that's overwashed. And then we get into the marsh system. Then we go tidal channels that are cutting through that. Some of them are very shallow, some of them are very, very deep. And then we get to the mainland. And then the mainland sort of slopes up very gently, or it can be a steep front that used to be an ancient shoreline. And now the marsh is meeting that.
So barrier islands along the coast of South Carolina and really along the entire East Coast, they're very unique systems. So the beachfront with its sand dune and beach environment is constantly subject to wave energy, storm impacts. The marsh front is subject to sea level changes, as the whole island is. So all of these different hazards are impacting the island from all sides. And the natural state of an island is to release sediment as it's impacted by hazards, and then naturally over time kind of build that sediment back up. So barrier islands are really dynamic living features that can take care of themselves if they're allowed to be dynamic. But human development has really altered that, right? We have drawn lines in the sand, we've drawn roads, we put houses out there. So now that natural breathing of the islands doesn't really happen anymore.
So along many of the coast, we have really chopped up the real estate. That's a huge tax base for most coastal communities. It pays for lots of resources within the state. We have a propensity to want to protect it. And so there's this balance between the natural evolution of the beaches, and then also the protective measures that people have put in place, whether they be revetments, we have groins, we have seawalls. So we take the natural system and we modify it using hard structures or some other structure that impacts how that natural system behaves. We end up making the decision between the public land and the private land. But what happens when we lose that high tide beach or even a low tide beach? How much is that worth to you as the public? How do you balance that? And that's a hard question, because not only have you lost the public beach, but you're also losing that protection to the inland areas.
We know that our forefathers may have done things that maybe we wouldn't have done, but we accept that and we take the challenge to say we're going to work with nature, we're going to balance the human needs with the natural needs and work towards some of these preservation efforts.
So my wife tells me she doesn't understand the difference between wetlands and floodplains. I said, babe, if the land is usually wet, it's wetlands. If it's only wet when it floods, it's a floodplain. Then she accuses me of mansplaining. I said, actually, I'm floodsplaining it to you right now. I've been on the couch since then.
The key to protecting our wetlands is not all that different than how we protect entire floodplains. Floodplains and wetlands can be wonderful places to live and explore. Understanding how they function allows for responsible development. This insight also helps us decide when development should be avoided or if areas should be restored. Both structural and non-structural approaches can be used to control water in and around wetlands. But most structural approaches just change where the flooding occurs, rather than addressing the flooding problem. Structural approaches control the flow of water using engineered solutions. Levees disconnect wetlands from the river. Dams inundate wetland areas. Seawalls help to prevent erosion of target areas. All structures alter natural hydraulic processes. Structures can be expensive to maintain, and poorly managed projects can have disastrous consequences. The failure of Michigan's Edenvale Dam in 2020 was largely attributed to poor maintenance and lack of regulatory enforcement. The recently completed Kissimmee River Restoration Project was a decades-long endeavor to right the course of an altered floodplain in Central Florida. In the 1960s, engineers designed a way to reroute the 103-mile-long river as a way to reduce development flooding. But the impact on native plants and wildlife proved to be too high a price. 4 decades later, project leaders set out to restore much of the floodplain to its original course. The culmination can be seen in the impressive return of native birds and fish and the vibrant colors of the refreshed ecosystem. It's a constant weighing of costs and benefits when large communities are built in and around wetlands. Property must be balanced with flood protection and habitat. Non-structural approaches basically accept flooding as a natural process that cannot be controlled. The focus is, instead, on altering human behavior through education, management, policy, or regulation. Educating the public about safe pesticide, herbicide, and fertilizer can save the wetlands from a barrage of dangerous chemical pollutants. In floodplain management, building or restoring buffers between wetlands and development lessens human disturbances like noise, light, trash, or intrusion. The use of easements and land acquisitions are good policies to keep flood-prone areas free from development. Different than, say, the easement that allows your local government to place a ditch in front of your house. A wetland easement is a legal agreement signed with the United States that pays the landowner to permanently protect the wetland areas of the property. If the area ends up drying up naturally, they can then be farmed or grazed. With an easement, the resident remains in control of the property under certain rules. The Agricultural Conservation Easement Program offers resources to landowners interested in environmental quality, historic preservation, and the protection of habitats and open space. Those eligible can apply with the USDA. Acquisition is when government purchases the land from the landowner and maintains it as federal property, conserving or converting the area to open space. Stick with us, this is Hazard. The task of wetland regulation falls to both state and federal government. 5 federal agencies protect wetlands, each with a different area of responsibility. The Army Corps of Engineers and the Environmental Protection Agency are responsible for implementing requirements set by the Clean Water Act. The Department of Defense's U.S. Army Corps of Engineers evaluates the viability of construction projects that occur in national waters and wetlands. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency protects wetlands primarily by regulating the chemical, physical, and biological integrity of the nation's waters. The Department of the Interior's U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service monitors fish and wildlife. It also enforces the rules that protect game and threatened or endangered species that may live in wetlands. The Department of Commerce's National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration monitors climate and protects the environment, especially regarding coastal resources. The Department of Agriculture's Natural Resource Conservation Service focuses on wetlands affected by agricultural activities. Wow! Wetland management has more departments than Macy's. Some U.S. states take federal laws a bit further. Florida's comprehensive plan expands on the federal 404 program and regulates most land changes that affect water quality and quantity. Unique to Florida, the plan also regulates the trimming of native mangrove trees, which help to stabilize the coastline and prevent erosion. The trimming of mangroves, that's fun to say. It sounds like a mystery novel about a landscaper, a beach house owner, and the mysterious disappearance of 80,000 acres. The Association of State Wetland Managers calls Louisiana's program one of the oldest and most robust in the country. A combined state and local wetland permitting process focuses solely on the coastal zone. The state of South Carolina allows development in wetlands only under what's called a no net loss, no net gain objective. Basically, if you fill in one place, you need to create, conserve, enhance, or restore wetlands elsewhere in the watershed. A watershed is an area of land that drains all the streams and rainfall to a common outlet. I know what it's like to keep a tool shed, but not a watershed. I bet you got to be real careful when you open the door on a watershed. Activities like filling, dredging, building, or draining within South Carolina wetlands require federal permits acquired through the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers.
So beach renourishment is essentially one of the original living shorelines. This is an idea to protect property that is not the traditional means that were in place back in the 70s, right? Back then you build a seawall to protect your property. So the goal of beach renourishment is really to recreate the natural beach and dune ecosystem. For example, on Folly Beach, they're located downdrift of Charleston Harbor, which has 3-mile-long jetties, right? And the jetties are trapping sand that's trying to make its way south down to Folly Beach. So Folly doesn't have a lot of natural sand input like other beaches have, so it has chronic beach erosion challenges. The best way to protect the property is to add sand because that's what's missing. At the same time, you're building a recreational beach, you're bolstering the economy, and you're providing habitat for nesting sea turtles and shorebirds. So there are a lot of benefits.
Our wetlands are not divided by county borders or state borders. We have a vast amount of salt marsh in the South Atlantic as a whole. So it's not just looking at it within our state lines. It's really important to protect congruent areas of large land and pristine land, so where the marsh and the land kind of back up together and big areas of that. And so a lot of agencies and land trusts and nonprofits are all working together to kind of protect and conserve a lot of these areas, similar to where we are right here at the Stono Preserve. The College of Charleston bought this area of land and is protecting it from development and it getting filled in. It's used as an education site as well.
So the City of Folly Beach has recently completed a marshfront management plan. And this is one of the first of its kind in the state. The city took the initiative to develop some new zoning ordinances and some new building codes to encourage development to back off from the marsh, turning those setbacks into buffer zones, so more natural areas. Whereas in the past, a way to protect the property would have been to build a bulkhead along the marsh front. Nowadays, we're tending more toward living shorelines, toward marsh grasses, toward sediment restoration in order to provide that buffer, to provide that protection over the long term.
It's not a mystery the role wetlands play in protecting not only plants and wildlife, but also people and development. And while progress has been made in floodplain defense, Advocates claim that gains do not reflect the current quality of wetlands that have been restored or replaced, or those that exist on private lands. According to congressional research, one battle lawmakers face is which wetlands, public and private, should be regulated by the Clean Water Act, which governs the discharges allowed into United States waters. Because wetlands vary so widely in form and the value they provide people, it is difficult, if not impossible, to use a one-size-fits-all solution. Property rights and development needs further complicate the very complex task of governing the intricate water systems that crisscross our country. The solution will come in the achievement of balance between sometimes competing interests and correctly identifying some of these sensitive areas as ones that need protection. Not all wetlands are protected with state and federal laws, which means they can be vulnerable to development. If we don't defend the wetlands, we lose a lot. It is in everyone's interest to understand their role in our environment and the strategic protection they provide. Thanks for watching. This is Hazard. I've never had to trim my mangrove. I can't even grow a mangrove. What is a mangrove? Well, sometimes what's lost is lost forever, like the 33 pair of sunglasses I bought last summer. Get out of here, get out of here.
Stop it. Put it here in the background and be like, stop.
So don't move my shoulders so much. I gotta
Please
stop.
stop.
You need food.